What's going on with you, my fellow rogues? Welcome back to the Rogue Den. This is your boy, the one, the only, self-appointed, guess what? Yes, you know it, self-anointed Rogue King. What's going on, everybody? Okay, so today we're going to have two videos uploaded. So this is just going to be like a little special for you guys. The next video is going to be more related, again, towards the YCS Montreal. We're going to be looking at all of the rogue strategies that we saw at YCS Montreal. But right now, what I wanted to discuss was... recently there's been a video going around about how Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a mid-range problem. And I watched that video, and I realized that both the guy who made the video, as well as many of the people who commented on the video, actually don't understand what the term mid-range or control or combo actually means. And the reason why they don't understand is because they don't actually know that those aren't actually the original names for those terms, right? It's not control deck, it's tempo control deck. And mid-range is still mid-range, but it's not combo, it's wombo combo, right? And I know that kind of sounds weird, and you're like, well, how does that matter? Well, the reason why it matters is because it helps you understand what those decks actually are, and therefore you can determine which deck you're playing and where it fits into that. And like, same thing with your opponents, right? Like, for example, the person in that video, you may have seen it already, claimed that Sky Strikers is a mid-range deck. It's actually not. It's actually a tempo control deck. And the reason why he didn't realize it was tempo control is because he didn't know that's what control means. It means tempo control. So that's how you know that it's a tempo control rather than a mid-range, is because you understand the objective of the deck, right? So we're going to go through defining the differences between all three of the decks here. So let's start with tempo control, okay? These decks are designed to not perform that many moves. Usually it's under 10 moves or so per turn, but the moves they do perform result in highly restricting the opponent's ability to make their own moves, right? A classic examples of this would be Trap Eldritch or Labyrinth or Sky Strikers, right? The two defining characteristics of this style is, firstly, the lack of moves that the deck makes. Usually it's going to be under 10 moves, as I said, but it can be a little bit more than that, but usually it's just like 10 moves and that's it, you know. Like Trap Eldritch being a perfect example of where they're basically just, you know, doing the one Eldritch play and then setting 5 back row passing, right? And then the second characteristic that the deck is known for is a significant amount of floodgates. Now, it's not necessary that they're actually going to be playing the floodgates, but if they do play those floodgates, then the deck is designed to just maintain those floodgates for as long as possible, okay? However, not all tempo control plays floodgates. Like, for example, Sky Striker doesn't really play floodgates, but what it does play is a plethora of ways to immediately stop their opponent's moves, right? And that's why it's tempo control. It's because they're immediately restricting your opponent over and over and over and over again, right? The objective of a tempo control deck is to control the pace of the game. That's why it's called tempo control, right? And therefore, and they do so by, as I said, restricting the opponent's ability to play. And they do that by using as few cards as possible. Okay, that's going to be the key thing here. Like, whatever capacity it has to control the game state, it's going to do so using as few cards as possible. So there's going to be a lot more one-for-one cards. Like, for example, Shark Cannon, right? Sky Striker, Mobilized Shark Cannon, whatever the thing is called, right? It's just going to be the Shark Cannon, negate the thing, and move on with your day, right? You can think of it that way. Or, like, another thing would be, like, Skill Drain. It's just going to do the Skill Drain and nothing else. The card itself is not a combo piece. It's just there to do the restriction and then move on, right? The theory goes that if a deck requires lots of moves to get to its ideal board state, then there is more opportunities for that deck to get stuck because there's more opportunities for an opponent to stop them, right? So tempo control uses that theory to its greatest advantage possible both by having as many ways as possible to restrict the opponent's movements, but also doing so in as few cards as possible, meaning there's as few opportunities as possible for it itself to get stopped, right? The main weakness of the deck is that because it utilizes as few cards as possible, it's also very difficult for the deck to pivot, and also can, once it is stopped, it's, you know, like, it's much easier to just, like, if you do interact with it, usually that's done, right? Like, for example, on the Sky Striker board, this is going to be a more of a classic example. Doesn't as much apply today, but it still somewhat applies. If you stop their Kagari and they don't have a follow-up to that, it's stopped, right? Tempo control decks tend to slow the game progression very heavily, and therefore can take the game several turns to end. That's one of the objectives of it, is that because they're tempo controlling, the idea is that they make the opponent run out of resources faster than they run out of resources, because they're using so few resources, whereas your opponent is using so many resources, right? Mid-range decks are somewhat combo heavy, but have a very similar objective to tempo control. That is why often players mistake the deck, think of a mid-range deck as a tempo control, or a control deck as a mid-range deck, because they have a similar objective, right? The two styles both try to produce its board in as few moves as possible, but not so much with the mid-range deck. Instead, it utilizes more moves to get to that tempo control state, right? The advantage of that is, so usually that amount of moves is something like 10 or 15 moves, maybe maximum 20 moves. The advantage of that is that it allows the deck to be a little bit more resilient, and allows the deck to be able to pivot if it does get interrupted. And it would still result in like nearly the same end board state as a result, because it just has more ways to get to that board. The disadvantage of that deck is that because it has more ways to get to that board, it also has more ways to get interacted with, right? And therefore presenting, more ways to get stopped. But still, the objective of the deck is to control the tempo. That's what makes it a mid-range, right? Because it's still a bit combo heavy, but the objective is still to control the tempo, not to end the game right away. Keep that part in mind. We'll get back to that. The quintessential example of a mid-range deck is currently branded, okay? Mid-range decks tend to get to the tempo control state by having an end board with as multiple layers as possible, instead of a wall of interruptions, right? That's why branded is a quintessential example, because they're not putting a bunch of interruptions right on the board all at once. Instead, it's multiple layers, so it's more immune to things like Dark Ruler No More and Regeki, because it can just, like, you do that Dark Ruler No More, here's another thing. You do that Regeki, here's another thing. That sort of thing, right? And it's not, it a bit has the capacity to OTK, but generally that's not the objective. If it has the opportunity, if the opportunity presents itself, it can take that opportunity, which is different from the tempo control. Usually, most tempo control decks don't really have an opportunity to OTK. Every once in a while they might, but that's most certainly not their objective. Whereas mid-range leaves that option open. It's not their objective, but they leave that option open, right? So that is, and now we're going to move into Wombo combo decks. So Wombo combo decks forego tempo altogether. They don't care about tempo at all. They just don't. The objective of Wombo combo deck is to present an overwhelming board right away. That is to say, put up the entire wall of interruptions right away. Put up the entire wall of boss monsters right away. Okay? On the turn one. The philosophy is that there's no need to grind out a game when they can simply produce an overwhelmingly strong board on the first turn and achieve this by using, as you know, multiple incredibly strong boss monsters, as well as other form of interruptions, just as quickly as possible, right? The wombo combo decks are usually like a minimum of 15 moves per turn. Usually it can be even way above that. Like, say, for example, Raid Raptors is just going to be an absurd number of moves, right? Every pile deck out there is almost certainly a wombo combo. And you can think about how many absurd amount of moves that it makes, right? The vast majority of all Yu-Gi-Oh decks throughout all time have been wombo combo decks. Okay, so keep that part in mind. The advantage of the deck is that it has the highest capacity to just simply win on the first turn, because it just, you know, puts out so much, right? And it also has the highest capacity to pivot. So if it does get interrupted, it has the highest capacity to change its game plan or change the way it's doing its thing to still achieve its objective, right? Going back to that, Tempo Control has very little, if no, capacity to pivot, whereas Midrange has a decent amount of capacity to pivot, and then combo decks have a large amount of capacity to pivot. So there's another huge differences between those there, okay? The disadvantage is that it has the highest capacity to get interrupted. Because it's doing so many moves, it has the highest capacity to get interrupted. And oftentimes, regardless of what pile deck you're looking at, there are certain pivotal moments in the wombo combo that if they do get interacted with, it really hinders that opponent. Like, for example, in the pile decks, successfully preventing Firewall Dragon from hitting the board is really detrimental to the gameplay, right? The second disadvantage of the wombo combo deck is that because it forgoes tempo, it's also foregoing the grind game, inherently so. And therefore, if it does go to like turn 3 or so, it has the highest capacity to lose, right? The most recently we've seen wombo combo pile decks kind of have the capacity to recover. So it's not as true as it used to be, because right now the best wombo combo decks have a bit of flavor of the mid-range, you know, and therefore, you know, it kind of feels like it's more like a mid-range deck, not a combo deck, but it still actually is a combo deck, right? But generally speaking, the problem with these decks is that they don't have a grind game. They're trying to win that turn, and so they invest everything into winning that turn, right? The result is, of course, is that it has the highest capacity to win that turn, but it also has the highest capacity to lose in the following turns. So it just needs to win that turn, you know? So essentially every blind second deck out there is a wombo combo deck for that very reason, because you just need to have as much capacity as possible to win that turn, right? So that's it for this video here. Let me know what you all think about this. Let me know if this was helpful for you here. Let me know if you want to see anything else. If you have any other questions, go ahead, leave it in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel here. I do read every one of my comments, and I do respond to them. So please do let me know what you all think, and I'll see you all in the next one. Love you. Have a good one, guys. Bye-bye.